Hi, my name is Reggie Leach, Treasurer of the Minnesota Conference. The Minnesota Conference has recently adopted an acronym called Eyes on Eternity, where the Eyes stands for evangelism, youth, education, and the S is for spirituality, service, and stewardship. And stewardship, being one of the pieces of the Eyes on Eternity, is an important piece, but it just is there as one of the 6 pieces, and it helps to fund the other pieces of ministry that help us focus on our mission and our vision here in the Minnesota Conference. So I want to talk about that for just a moment. I just want to say thank you to the Minnesotans who have been faithful in giving over the years. Tithe has increased an average of 3% over the past 15 years, and in that time, there's been only one slightly negative year. And so far in 2015, tithe is up over 7%. Hopefully we will finish well ahead of 2014's $7.4 million in giving. In addition to tithing, there are several other areas of giving that need your generous support: your local church budget, world mission, and our Minnesota Advance. From the conference perspective, the challenge is this. From 2000 to 2007, our Minnesota Advance was basically flat. The $132,000 we received in 2000 was almost exactly the same as the $132,000 we received 8 years later in 2007. The good news is that in 2008 and 2009, Minnesota Advance increased 50%. In 2009, Minnesota Advance giving had increased to more than $205,000. However, since 2009, we've hit a flat spot again. In 2014, Minnesota Advance was again at $205,000. And unfortunately, in 2015, we're still lagging behind that number. It looks like we've flatlined again. We need another major boost for 2016. If we look at things another way, let's assume that the $7.4 million in tithe is a true 10%. Now we realize that tithe returned by our membership is in reality only 50% of the members giving tithe. But if the tithe envelope suggests giving 1 to 2% for Minnesota Advance, how would giving even additional 1% to Minnesota Advance impact our ministries in Minnesota? We would have had $742,000 in Minnesota Advance offerings last year, an increase of more than $537,000. Well, evangelism would be increased $176,000. That would translate to 200 to 300 additional baptisms each year. North Star Camp, one of our youth ministries, would have an extra $62,000, which could enhance programming at North Star Camp or help us finish up our Lift the Lodge visioning campaign. Our church buildings would have an additional $26,000. You see, each year we get requests from churches asking if they can build or buy a church, and we like to be able to help with up to $20,000 per project, which would be a huge boost since we've had to deny several requests in the last couple of years. Church schools, our elementary church schools, need a bit of assistance as well. Giving 1% to Minnesota Advance would increase the amount given to church schools by $106,000. Each church that supports a school could receive $6,200 per teacher as a rebate. Maplewood Academy buildings are also helped by Minnesota Advance, and they would receive an additional $13,000. That fund has decreased by over $250,000 in the past 10 years. We need to replenish the fund. Our communications department would also receive an additional amount from Minnesota Advance. $27,000 would pretty much totally offset what we send to the union for our Outlook. Finally, Maplewood Academy would receive an additional $165,000 for operating if everyone faithfully gave 1% to Minnesota Advance offerings. This would help reduce the stress on our fundraising goals at Maplewood. You see, Maplewood Academy is our Minnesota educational evangelism. It would help us to continue to expand educational outreach, Seventh-day Adventist educational outreach to young people across the state. You see, giving 1% to Minnesota Advance would cause the least heavy lifting by any individual or by our fundraising, but it would significantly reduce some of the stress on several areas of ministry. So I would encourage everyone to continue being faithful in their tithing, but also to be faithful in offerings to your local church budget, to world missions, and importantly, to Minnesota Advance as well. Thank you.